So if you were a clinic administrator today and you had dollars to spend, what would you spend them on, and where would you actually put those dollars in order to sort of gain the biggest impact?
Yeah, and not to harp on the same topic, and this may sound self-serving, but I thought a lot about that question. I truly, I'm a true cloud advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether that's my product or another. I just think with the complexity facing healthcare IT, I would spend that money on getting my systems migrated to infrastructure as a service or a cloud-based system, because it solves so many of those other ancillary issues that we're not always talking about. And go back to that first example, the disaster recovery as a service. Having having your systems migrated to the cloud, it just simplifies everything. It's so much more efficient. It simplifies this equation. It simplifies the infrastructure support equation as far as having to have really advanced subject matter expertise on staff. Mm-hmm. It really, really, really makes your environment more efficient. So another example in that I like to give is, the turn of the century in the early 1900s, factories were producing their own power in gigantic spaces below their offices. And that was before the grid. Well, the cloud really is kind of the grid equivalent for compute and for building out server infrastructure. So that would be kind of 1A. I would really consider spending that money on that kind of adoption. Second, maybe a 1B, is spend the money on a really good comprehensive IT assessment. That's another initiative I've been really, really hot on, as far as just in an assessment that doesn't just detail the technology, but details the business side of it as well. I'm kind of really aligning the technology with the business goals. It's a really good way. It's not always popular to have the consultant come meet with your IT team or whatever. There's movies about that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to be a negative. Great movie, by the way. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a negative. In fact, in my experience, the assessment process really can take a lot off the plate of those IT departments of stuff that they're just sitting on, and help prioritize. We always like to say there's a big difference between being busy and being effective. And, people tend to gravitate to work on the things that they like to work on. And having kind of an assessment that comes in from a technology perspective, but also from a business perspective, helps bring the top priorities, move them up the line, and then and puts a framework in place for how to communicate that with the executives. So then those are very comprehensive, lengthy assessments. So. And those would be two places that I think you're going to get the most bang for your buck, just from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, I totally agree, by the way. As you were saying it, I found myself sort of nodding my head, but it wasn't the interviewing nodding my head. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Those are the kind of things that I would look at, especially in this day and age and sort of this environment. Especially as things move so quickly, what I'm finding is that, there's specialists in every area. You talk to some folks, and I know clients who there's a meaningful use person on staff, and that's what they do. And when I'm talking to them, I typically get an education, because they're like, well, no, what came out yesterday from the ONC? And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't even want to try to keep up with all that. And I think it's the same kind of stuff from a technology platform perspective. There's just it just would be hard to keep up. And an outside folks can do that. They can keep up on what they're specialized at.
Well, and I like I said, I've worked both sides of that fence, and from putting my IT director hat on, there is that pressure that we feel that we have the expertise. You're paying us good money to know these things. But at the same time, part of that role, what I've come to learn is it's also, when I was, to be clear, I was a good generalist. I wasn't a virtual infrastructure expert. I wasn't a network security expert. And realistically, my staff that we had, they were kind of the same mold. And so it's just when you have someone that's really skilled at DBA work, trying to configure your virtual infrastructure, you don't always get left with the best configuration, and that's
Yep.
what having having some outside expertise can help with, is just really people that work in that particular scope of technology on a daily basis, making sure everything's configured appropriately.
Yeah, cool.